Welcome to Bad Kids Don't Exist. This is the podcast that helps adults better understand kids to create environments where kids and their caregivers thrive. My name is Stuart Perry. I go by Mister Stu. I am a licensed clinical social worker, a child therapist, and an autism spectrum disorder clinical specialist, and I love helping adults better understand kids. I find that so much frustration that comes from being a parent or a teacher or a caregiver or a professional who works with kids comes down to misunderstanding. As adults, it can be in our minds that children are just mini adults, that they have everything that adults have. They're just in little bodies. And children do deserve the same respect as adults, but they're not little adults. There's a lot going on in their little minds and their little bodies that is a lot different from us as adults. So I'm here to hopefully help adults like you understand kids a little bit better, to decrease your stress, increase your empathy, increase your compassion. Because if you'll increase those things, you can increase your patience and you can increase your knowledge about children, and then you can support them in the best ways that you possibly can. And both the kids in your life and you can thrive. And that's what I'm here to do. Today, I am actually very excited. I've got a few quick questions that were written in this week, but I also had a thought that I would love to share with you, and that's really what I'd like to start with today. There is a quote that has just been coming up over and over and over again in sessions that I'm having with clients and in conversations that I'm having with parents and teachers, and when I travel and speak at trainings, and even in my keynote addresses. It seems to be something that is consistently something that I need to remind myself of, and that I need to remind the adults in children's lives about. And here is that quote: "The first time you do anything, you will be bad at it." That's right. The first time you do anything, you will be bad at it. I like to take it even a little bit further and say the first several times you do most things, you're going to be bad at it. And maybe a good example of this is learning to play an instrument. If you are learning to play an instrument, the first time you do it, you're going to be bad at it. The first several times that you are learning this instrument, you are going to be bad at it. If you're a parent and you've ever had a child who is practicing their recorder in front of you, you know the first time they do it, they're going to be bad at it. And in their heads, it is beautiful music that deserves to be recorded and put out for the masses to hear. But the first time they do it, they're going to be bad at it. And the second time and the third time and over. And really, the recorder never is an instrument that somebody wants to listen to. But the first time that you do anything, you will be bad at it. We need to remind ourselves of that as we work with children. Whether they are your children, or whether they are children in your life, or children that you are hired to support, children are doing so many things for the first time, or the first several times. And that comes down to everything, not just math, not just learning an instrument, not just a new subject at school, but think about learning how to manage their emotions. Maybe it's the first time, or the first few, or the first several times that they are learning how to manage their emotions when they're around other kids. As adults, can we say that we do a great job of managing ourselves when we are around other people? Well, kids are doing this for the first time, or the first few times. Let's give them some grace. Or maybe it's a kindergartner who's in a classroom full of 30 other children for the very first time in their life. let's give them some grace, because the first time or the first few times or even the first several times that they do it, they're going to be bad at it. If you can remember that, and if you can keep that in mind, and you can really treat children with the understanding that, you know what, yes, they are bad at this, or they are not where we want them to be, but they're doing the best they know how to do. If you can approach them with that mindset, you can have some compassion and some empathy. And then on the flip side of that, to know that they are working so hard. They are not going to be good at it. They're going to be bad at it, at least the first few times that they do something, or the first several times that they do a lot of things. But can we give them praise? Can you find ways to give them praise for the things they are doing correctly? Maybe it's with cleaning their room and they leave the clothes all over the floor, but they got the trash out of their room. Can you praise them for getting the trash out? And yeah, you can say, hey, next time make sure you get your clothes too, but can you tell them, but wow, you got all the trash out. Just last night, I was teaching a group at a church about autism spectrum disorder. And we were talking about helping children with autism spectrum disorder learn to use the bathroom, potty training, toilet training. And for a lot of children with autism, that's a really difficult thing for so many different reasons, and it's kind of different for every child. But I was reinforcing the fact that, you know what, maybe those first few times, it's just that they're brave enough to sit on the toilet. And they're brave enough to sit there. Can you praise them for that? Even though they didn't go in the toilet, and even though there's still a long way to go, and maybe they were crying while they were sitting there, but they hopped up on it. Can you give them praise for that? And if you can do that, over time, they'll see, oh my goodness, this adult in my life sees that I am working so hard. And even though I'm not where either of us wants me to be, they see that I am making some progress. And so that empowers me. That makes me want to make even more progress. And it makes me want to work harder. And it makes me want to push myself, because I see that they see how hard I'm working. Just remember, kids are doing so many things for the very first time, or the first few or first several. We've got to give them some grace, because they're going to be bad at it. But we can find the things they are doing right and let them know that we notice. That is really just something that keeps coming up. And so I wanted to share that with you today before I dive into a few questions that have come in this week across the various channels. So I will jump right into question number 2. But first, let me say, if you don't yet, please follow me on social media. I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram. I'm starting to figure out Threads. I'm making decisions about whether or not I'll be on X, but Facebook and Instagram, on there, it's at Mister Stu TV. That's MISTERSTU TV. And then I'm also on YouTube. You can find me at youtube.com/@MrStuTV. And if you check those various platforms out, you'll see a little bit of different stuff across each platform. Please follow me on all of them. It helps me out a whole lot, and it's absolutely free to do so, but it will make a big difference. Let's jump into the first question for today. Mr. Stu, as a parent, I'm worried about my child constantly arguing with their siblings and having trouble focusing on homework. Should I be concerned about these behaviors? Oh, great question. Thank you so much for sending that in. A lot of the things that you mentioned some arguing with siblings, and you said constantly arguing with siblings, and then focusing on homework. Those are some things that come up a lot in my office. There are clients whose parents come in and they say, it seems like it's always something. They're always arguing with their brother, their sister. And when it's homework time, they can't seem to sit down and get their work done. And I have to remind them over and over and over and over again to do their homework. Most of the time, those things are completely typical, normal behaviors from children. They're not something to panic about, and it's not something to rush and get professional help about. A lot of times, kids are going to fight with their siblings. And a lot of times, kids can think of other things they'd rather be doing than their homework. It's not atypical for those behaviors to pop up. And really, there's so many different behaviors that are like that, whether it be lying. Lying is a typical childhood behavior. Or even having difficulty managing their emotions and throwing tantrums. That's a typical childhood behavior. That doesn't mean just accept it and don't do anything about it and just allow the child to do whatever they want to do. But it does mean take a breath, because most of those things are typical for childhood development. You did mention that it was constant arguing with a sibling. So let me tell you, in mental health, there's a few things that we monitor, and I've shared this in other videos before, but there's a few things that we monitor to see if something is typical versus atypical. First and foremost, you can actually head over to my website, badkidsdon'texist.com, and there you can find a page of resources. In the resources, you can find a sheet that's called Spot the Difference, and it outlines different things that are typical in childhood development across various years of their development versus atypical, some things that really are abnormal and might need some professional support. So feel free to go. That sheet is free and you can download it, and maybe some of your questions will be answered that way. But there are a few things that as mental health professionals we watch, and it's the acronym FIT. F-I-T. The F stands for frequency, the I stands for intensity, and the T stands for time. Frequency, intensity, and time. FIT. You said that your children are constantly arguing. That sounds to me like frequency is pretty high. And that's something to watch. If there is constant, truly constant conflict between siblings, there may be a deeper issue that's going on. That frequency is important. How often something's happening. The same goes with tantrums or lying. Yeah, it's totally typical and normal for a child to lie every once in a while. It's totally typical and normal for a child to throw a tantrum every once in a while. But if that frequency is pretty high, if they are consistently having tantrums and consistently lying and consistently arguing with their siblings, there may be a deeper issue going on. The next one is intensity, or how extreme is the behavior. Sure, a tantrum is a normal thing, but if a child is banging their head on a wall or threatening to harm themselves or hurting other people, that might be something that requires professional support, or at least more support, because the intensity, how extreme it gets, is very high. The same can be true with that arguing with siblings, where maybe it's not just verbal arguments, but it's resulting in physical violence between the siblings, and that's happening pretty consistently, and it's pretty extreme when it happens. There may be a deeper issue there that requires more support. And then finally, time, or how long the thing lasts. Again, totally normal and typical for a child to throw a tantrum. It's not usually typical and normal for a child to throw a tantrum for hours and hours and hours. If that happens, there may be a deeper issue that's going on. Those are some things that you can watch in your child, is some of these typical, yes, frustrating, but typical childhood behaviors come up, is watch how often they're happening, the frequency, how extreme they get, the intensity, and how long they last, the time. If for negative behaviors, those things are going up, it's happening more frequently, more intensity, and lasting longer, it may be time to seek some professional support. If for positive behaviors, the frequency is coming down, it's happening less often, less extreme, and lasting for less periods of time, it may be time to seek some professional support. But for the most part, kids are going to make mistakes. And mistakes are one of the best ways for children to learn and one of the best ways for all of us to learn. But they're going to make mistakes in the way that they relate with others and in the way that they take care of themselves and take care of the things that they need to do. They're going to make some mistakes because they're children. And the first time you do anything, you will be bad at it. But watch that frequency, intensity, and time. And if for negative behaviors, it's starting to increase pretty consistently, or for positive behaviors, it's starting to decrease pretty consistently, then it may be time to seek some professional support. You also mentioned homework and not being able to focus during homework, and really all of us have some difficulty focusing when we're doing work that we don't really want to do and maybe don't even see a purpose in. So if your child is struggling with focusing on homework, try to help them out by chunking it. You can break it into little pieces and you can say, hey, I know you've got this whole page of math problems to do. How about you do a few problems and then we can run around the house and then come back and do a couple more problems and then we can run around the house again, or whatever it might be. If you break it down into those pieces and show them, yes, you can focus, but maybe for shorter periods of time, that can really support them as well. It's difficult sometimes because as parents and caregivers and professionals, we want children to just do everything so well, but they're doing so many things for the very first time, very first few times, or the very first several times. They're going to be bad at some of those things. They're not going to be great at some of those things. And there's going to be a lot that they're really trying to work out. And really, that's true of all of us. So give them some of that grace too, and then monitor that frequency, intensity, and time, and see what comes from it. You can also make sure that you go to the website badkidsdon'texist.com and download that Spot the Difference sheet so that you can understand a little bit more about typical and atypical childhood development. Thank you so much for writing in that question. If you have a question, you can feel free to throw it in the chat, or you can also write in on any of my social media channels. Like I said, I am most active on Facebook and Instagram. It's at Mister Stu TV, and also YouTube, youtube.com/@MrStuTV. I'm happy to field any questions that come up, whether it be live during this video or throughout the week. You can send those in through a direct message, and I'm happy to get to them. Let's go to the next question. Hello, Mr. Stu. I work with children. You know what? Hello back to you. I work with children diagnosed with ADHD, and I find it challenging to keep them attentive during activities. How can I better support their focus without constantly redirecting them? This is a question that comes up all the time, whether it be from people whose children really are diagnosed with ADHD and really do have ADHD, or whether it just be from parents or teachers who are concerned about their children's ability to focus. As a matter of fact, I teach a workshop that's anywhere between 4 and 6 hours long, where I talk about the brain function in different mental health disorders. And I always ask therapists before I lead the training, what are some of the most difficult diagnoses that you have found it is to work with? And almost all the time, therapists have two different answers, but one of them is ADHD. There is a lot of misconception about ADHD and a lot of misunderstanding about what the real problem is in ADHD. People have come to believe that ADHD means a child cannot focus. And that's not true. There's a lot of things going on in the brain, and when you focus and you feel like everything's just kind of grooving, maybe you're reading a great book, or you're watching a great movie, or you're really just invested in something and you're able to focus in on it, what's happening is your brain is receiving a chemical called dopamine. That dopamine is the brain's reward chemical. And so as you are focusing, your brain is rewarding you. It's saying, yes, this is good. Yes, this is good. Keep doing that. Yes, don't you feel good? Keep focusing. And it's giving you that dopamine. In children with ADHD, or just individuals with ADHD, what happens is their brain is not giving them that same amount of dopamine as someone who does not have ADHD. The problem is not that they can't focus. The problem is that they are not being rewarded for focusing. Their brain isn't giving them that reward chemical, so they turn to something that will give them that reward chemical. We see this in our own lives as we scroll on our phones. Scrolling on your phone floods your brain with dopamine. That's why it feels so good to sit there and just scroll and scroll and scroll. And then maybe you stop scrolling and you kind of feel like, ugh. And yeah, it's some from the stuff that you were seeing on your social media, but it's also because your brain was flooded with all that dopamine and now it's having a withdrawal from the dopamine. And if children are allowed to just constantly scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, their brain is flooded with so much dopamine. So when we want them to be able to focus on other things that aren't flooding their brains with dopamine, it becomes much more difficult because their brain is like, yeah, but we could just go back to the phone and it would be a whole lot easier. It would feel a whole lot better. So if you are working with children who are diagnosed with ADHD or who have ADHD, the best thing you can do is reward them for focusing. That doesn't mean you have to give them candy for focusing or buy them donuts for focusing or even give them stickers for focusing. What it means is you have to be their dopamine. You have to be the thing that says, yes, good job, great, doesn't that feel good? If you'll do that, then you won't have to redirect them as often. You will be giving them that burst of pleasure, that burst of reward for doing the thing you want them to do. Let's say that they're able to sit down and do a math problem. You can flood their brain with praise, and that praise acts as the brain's dopamine. And over time, their brain will be like, ooh, this focusing thing does give us some reward. Maybe it's not within us just yet, but ooh, it does feel good to focus. And if you can be the brain's dopamine for a time, then over time, the child's brain will start to be able to do that on its own. They'll be able to internalize some of the things that you say. So if you say, oh, wow, great job, you got that problem done. Look at you, you're able to sit there and focus. And you say that over and over, and every time they're focused, you are just flooding them with praise and giving them that dopamine burst. Then over time, their own brain will be able to do it, and they'll start to talk to themselves that way. They'll be working on a math problem and they'll be saying, yeah, Mr. Stu, look at you. You're able to focus. That feels really good. Oh yeah, you got that problem done. Fantastic. The problem is not an inability to focus. The problem is a lack of reward for focusing. That's why individuals with ADHD will constantly go to the next thing because their brain is saying like, yeah, that might take a little bit longer, but the dopamine's right here. And then they're doing this one. And they're like, yeah, this isn't giving us enough. Let's go to that one. That one will give us some dopamine. So as the adults in these children's lives, we have to act as the dopamine. We have to act as the reward chemical. If you will act as the reward chemical and the praise chemical, then what can happen is you won't have to redirect and correct as much. You will be talking just as much because you'll be flooding them with praise, but it's much less frustrating to give a child a lot of praise than it is to redirect and correct them over and over and over and over again. So try that out. Be their brain's dopamine. And if you'll do that, you can build that skill within them. They'll start to see it's not always about getting something. Maybe it's just receiving that praise for a little bit, but it's not about receiving an item. That's not the only thing that can give them that good rewarded feeling. And as they take in your praise, they'll start to talk kinder to themselves and they can start to give themselves praise. And then they can build a tolerance that even though their brain isn't flooding them with dopamine, they know some ways that they can give themselves that burst of reward on their own. Hopefully that's helpful. Try it out. See if being a child's dopamine helps you not have to redirect and correct them as much. But you will be talking just as much because you're flooding them with praise, but hopefully less frustrated talking. Thanks so much for writing in. Again, if you are watching this, please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. It's at Mister Stu TV on all those channels. You'll see different things across each one, and I would greatly appreciate if you'd follow, like, and subscribe. Thanks so much. Let's go on to the next question. Hey, Mr. Stu. Hey, back to you. I'm a single parent and often feel overwhelmed, like I'm not doing enough for my child. I've watched your videos and it seems I'm just doing everything wrong. Help. Ah, thank you so much for being so honest about that. I find that parents are incredibly hard on themselves. You want to do the best that you possibly can for your child. And I know that there are so many different voices. There are so many people telling you to do so many different things, and so many books that are just completely against each other. One book will tell you to do one thing, another book tells you to do the exact opposite, and same with videos like this on YouTube. I'm telling you one thing, somebody else is telling you another, and your child is screaming and you don't know which one to do, and it feels like you've tried everything, and then it feels like maybe it's your fault. And I have these conversations with parents all the time where they just feel defeated, or they feel like they're not enough, or they feel like they haven't done enough to help their child and support their child. Let me just start by saying this. You are exactly the parent your child needs. It's you, not anybody else. And however you came into caring for this child, whether they're your biological child, your foster child, your adopted child, maybe they are your grandchild or your niece or your nephew, whoever it is, you are exactly the parent your child needs. Start by giving yourself some grace. You are doing a lot of things for the first time. And just like at the start of this hour-long conversation, I said, the first time you do anything, you will be bad at it. The same is true for parents. And guess what? Somebody told me that, yeah, and then every year you are parenting a new child because this is your first time parenting an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, or maybe they're your second or your third child, but this is the first time you are parenting this child at this stage of their life. But I want to take it even further than that, because every day they wake up, they are a little bit older, a little bit more mature, a little bit more developed. So every single day is the first time you are parenting this specific child. And yes, you can watch for patterns, and yes, you can know them, and yes, you can love them, and yes, you can watch them grow, and yes, you can be so excited about all those things, but every single day is brand new. So give yourself some grace, because every single day you are parenting this specific child at this age and stage for the very first time. You might be bad at it. You might make some mistakes. Give yourself some grace, because you are working so hard. And you are doing the best you know how to do. I have worked with literally thousands of children, with thousands of different parents, hundreds of different combinations of parents and different types of parents, thousands. And I can tell you that 99.999999999% of parents are doing the best they know how to do, even when they end up in abusing their child, or even when they end up in jail or prison, or even when they're doing things that are completely and utterly unacceptable with or around their child. They are doing the best they know how to do. That doesn't mean that those things are acceptable. It doesn't mean to just let it go. It doesn't mean that they should just stay there. But I am saying they are doing the best they know how to do, and the same is true for you. Give yourself some grace. And then as you learn different things, you can check yourself and you can say, oh, you know what? I messed that one up. I didn't know that last week. When I screamed at my child, I didn't know that screaming at a child just makes them completely panic. And there's no way that I can connect with them and help them learn and terrify them all at the same time. I didn't know that last week, but I know it now, and I'm going to make that change. And maybe you go to your child and you apologize and you say, you know what? I've been watching this bearded man on YouTube, and he's been telling me these things. And last week when I yelled at you, that was unacceptable. I am not going to do that anymore. I'm going to do my absolute best to not do that. And if I do that, I want you to check me on it. You didn't know what you know now. And so you can level up. You can level up because every day is brand new. And every single day is a brand new day where you are doing a lot of things for the very first time, the very first few times, or the very first several times. So give yourself some grace. You are exactly the parent your child needs. You are doing so many things for the very first time, and you are doing the best you know how to do. Just let your best keep getting better. And as your best keeps getting better, and as you keep learning new things and keep learning different techniques to try and different supports to offer and different just fun things to do with your child, you can incorporate more and more and more and more, and you will be a better parent every single day. Give yourself some grace. No, you are not where you want to be as a parent, but you're doing the best you know how to do right now. And if you'll keep growing and you'll keep learning, and when there are difficult times, you keep seeking out help, whether it be from friends or people at church or professionals or whoever it might be, you keep seeking out help and support, then you'll keep leveling up. And as you keep leveling up, you'll start seeing yourself becoming more and more the parent that you want to be. And as you start becoming more and more the parent you want to be, you'll start seeing your child grow, and you'll start seeing them grow into the person that they want to be and that you have always hoped that they were going to be. And you can grow together. But today, right now, give yourself some grace. You're doing a lot of things for the first time, and you are doing the best you know how to do. Just keep letting that best get better. And when you learn something new, incorporate it. Forgive yourself for not knowing it before, and then move forward. Keep growing. Hopefully, maybe that was a helpful little pep talk for you. I kind of got away from myself there for a minute, but I hope that was helpful for you to understand that you're just doing the best you can. And if you'll keep doing that, that's what can make a big, big difference. Thank you so much for writing in that question. Again, if you're watching this or listening to it, please make sure to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. It's at Mister Stu TV on all those channels. And if you will like and follow and subscribe, it really makes a huge difference. We all know that this whole thing is driven by an algorithm, and the more people who are liking and subscribing and following, the more this will get pushed to other people, and it just makes a big, big difference for me if you will go in and do that free thing that takes so little time. Follow me at Mister Stu TV on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I've got one more question for today, and then we'll wrap up. Here we go. Hi, Mr. Stu. Hi, back to you. I love the ones that are like, hey there, Mr. Stu. Hello, Mr. Stu. Mr. Stu. Ah. It makes me feel good. Hi, Mr. Stu. Hi, back to you. I think my child needs some help, but I'm hesitant to pursue a diagnosis because I don't want them to be labeled. How can I ensure that focus? How can I ensure that the focus remains on their growth and not just a diagnosis? Great question. This is one that comes up pretty often, and it's also one that prevents people from jumping into therapy in the first place. It makes people uncomfortable when we start to bring up a diagnosis in therapy. It's sometimes the reason people stop doing therapy or maybe don't tell the school about a diagnosis because they're afraid that their child is going to be labeled. And if I'm honest, it's a valid concern. A lot of times, different people view diagnoses in different ways. And it can be hard sometimes if your child goes into certain environments with a diagnosis and shares that they have that diagnosis. It can be difficult in certain places. I can also say that in most places, or at least in a lot of places, maybe I shouldn't say most, but at least in a lot of places in today's world, diagnoses are just viewed as just something. We've kind of come to the understanding that everybody has something. Whether or not they've been to a professional and it's been labeled, everybody's kind of got something. As a matter of fact, during many of my trainings, I talk about the brain and I show the neurotypical brain, and I try to emphasize that the neurotypical brain doesn't really exist. There is no perfectly working brain in the world. All of us kind of have something going on. And then some of us have more extreme things going on that actually lead to disorders. Some of us have just learned to tolerate and move through life with a disorder. Everybody's a little bit different. And luckily in today's world, we kind of understand that. So breathe easy knowing that in a lot of environments, your child will not be labeled as anything just because they have a diagnosis. Another side of that, another therapist that I work with and we have talked about how really a diagnosis is only for insurance purposes. The way that I do therapy, I use a method that's called child-centered play therapy. And child-centered play therapy is the same for every child, no matter their diagnosis. And it's evidence-based for every diagnosis and every age group. So children with autism, ADHD, depression, adults with trauma, adults with personality disorders. It's evidence-based to help all groups. And many therapists use things like that. Many therapists use modalities that can kind of be applied across a diagnosis, and a diagnosis specifically doesn't change a whole lot of what we do. We just have to report a diagnosis to an insurance company so that they will fund us so that we can give your child the support that they need. I say all that to say, really, a diagnosis is not the most important thing about your child. The most important thing about your child is that there's some type of disorder or some type of disruption that needs some help. So whatever you want to call it, they need some help. And that is really what this comes down to. I understand you don't want your child to be labeled or mislabeled, and that happens pretty often too. But understand that a diagnosis is not a death sentence, and it's not a permanent fixture of your child. Even with things like autism spectrum disorder, it used to be believed that where someone was on the autism spectrum, that's just where they are, and it's where they're always going to be no matter what. They've just got to kind of learn to tolerate it, and everybody else has to kind of learn to pick up all the pieces. We know that that is no longer the case. People with autism can move up and down the spectrum depending on the amount of support they receive and the way that their brains kind of click in at different times. And that's true of almost every diagnosis, that people can sometimes even completely be healed of various diagnoses. But at least they can start to tolerate that diagnosis or learn to live with that diagnosis or learn supports for that diagnosis to where it's no longer a disorder, and then the diagnosis is no longer valid. Keep that in mind, that a diagnosis, very few diagnoses are permanent. There's almost no permanent diagnoses in children. And I gave the example of autism spectrum disorder. Even in children with autism spectrum disorder, that's not a permanent, fixed diagnosis, especially the level that they're at. It can move up and down and all across, and same with depression, same with ADHD, same with PTSD. All those diagnoses have a big, wide spectrum of different symptoms, and your child can improve. And then many of those diagnoses can actually be completely alleviated with proper supports. Keep that in mind as you are seeking support for your child, that it's not a label. It's not their name. Their name is not Bobby with ADHD. Their name is not Susie with depression. Their name is not Tony with autism. That's not their name. It's not their label. It's not who they are. It's a thing that's going on that needs some support. And if you can approach it with that mindset, and really know that therapists, the only reason we give a diagnosis is just for an insurance company. Just so the insurance knows there really is something that's going on. You really do need to pay us so that we can help this person. When you understand that, a diagnosis becomes much less scary. It's not a permanent thing. It's not something that's fixed by any means. And it's not a name. It's not a label. It's not a death sentence. It is just the thing that's going on that needs some help. If you can approach it that way, hopefully that can help you have a little more courage to reach out and get the support that your child needs. And that's what it's really all about. You might be really nervous, but they are really hurting. So they need some help. Don't let your fear keep them from getting what it is that they need. Hopefully today's questions and answers were helpful for you. I have been having a blast talking through these different things and sharing different thoughts that I have with you. If you have any questions, you can write into question@MrStuTV.com. That is the email address where you can share with me your different questions. You can also write a direct message or post a comment on any of my social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube @Mister Stu TV. Please like, follow, subscribe, do all those things. It helps me out tremendously. And I love helping adults better understand kids. If that sounds like a good fit for you and an event you might have coming up, please reach out to me. You can head over to badkidsdon'texist.com and click on booking, and there you'll find all the information you need to hire me as a keynote speaker or a workshop leader. I can't wait to hear about whatever it is that you are wanting to put on and make that next event an absolutely great one. Until next time, remember that some things exist and some things just don't. Bad kids don't exist. I'll see you again next week. Make sure to write in your questions. And until then, spread the word and share the love. Bye-bye.